Okay, so if you're listening to this, then we are trying to flip the classroom, and we're going to do a little bit of the reading for homework so we can discuss it during class. The first story I want to talk about is Kate Chopin's The Story of an Hour, right? So I'll just go ahead and start, and basically what we're going to do is we're going to read this together, and I'm going to make some stopping points and make sure we understand everything that we're talking about. So we're actually doing this together. I'm reading, you're reading, and as the thoughts come to me, I'm just going to go ahead and say them out. All right? All right, so this is The Story of an Hour by Kate Chopin. Knowing that Miss Mallard was affected with heart trouble, great care was taken to break to her as gently as possible the news of her husband's death. So right there, let's stop. And we have Miss Mallard is already our first character. And we know that she has heart trouble. Okay. Heart trouble would mean like she has a weak heart, or she can't do things that are lots of high energy, stuff like that, for fear of her having a heart attack. So because we know she has heart trouble, it says great care was taken to break to her as gently as possible the news of her husband's death. So right there, boom, we know something's happened. This is the inciting incident. Her husband has died, and because she has a heart problem, we got to chill out, and we can't tell her, hey, your husband's dead. She's going to freak out. So we got to take it and break it to her nice and gently. It was her sister Joseph. Okay, I'm returning. Line 6. It was her sister Josephine who told her, in broken sentences, veiled hints that revealed in half concealing. Her husband's friend Richards was there too, near her. It was he who had been in the newspaper office when intelligence of the railroad disaster was received, with Brentley Mallard's name leading the list of killed. He had only taken the time to assure himself of its truth by a second telegram, and had hastened to forestall any less careful, less tender friend in bearing the sad message. All right, so Josephine is her sister, and Josephine is there with Richards, who's like a friend of the family. And Richards is the one who was in the mail office when the telegram came in. Because remember, this is happening a while back. And this was before the internet and before cell phones and stuff like that. So a telegram comes in, and it says, hey, your husband has just died. Well, his name comes in, Brent Mallard. And so Richard sees it, and he waits for a second one. And when he gets the second one, that's when he's like, I got to tell her. I got to let her know so that way everything's okay. So he takes off, and he tells Josephine, and now Josephine and he are there to break it down to Miss Mallard, that your husband's dead. Line 15. She did not hear the story as many women have heard the same, with a paralyzed inability to accept its significance. She wept at once, with sudden, wild abandonment, in her sister's arms. When the storm of grief had spent itself, she went away to her room alone. She would have no one follow her. All right, so basically the sister breaks it to her, and she like wails. She like just goes crazy, like, whoa, right? Like, her husband is dead. And she just freaks out. Like, she falls into her arms, and it says, beautiful the metaphor, like the storm of grief, right, had spent itself. Like, it was a storm. It was like her crying. It was like a big deal, right? It spent itself. And then she went to be alone in her room. And people deal with sadness in different ways, so she wanted to be alone, okay? So she didn't have anybody follow her. She wanted to be alone. She goes to her room. Line 21. There stood, facing the open window, a comfortable, roomy armchair. Into this she sank, pressed down by a physical exhaustion that haunted her body and seemed to reach into her soul. Okay, so this is what's interesting to me. After she cries, she goes to her room, and her room is described as beautiful. Like, there stood facing the open window, a comfortable, roomy armchair. I mean, when you're thinking of sadness and when someone's sad, you don't want words like comfortable and roomy and armchair. It says that she sank down, pressed into by physical exhaustion that haunted her body. It doesn't mean like she became possessed or anything. Like, she's just beat, like, think about a time that you really cried, and you cried so hard, like your body was tired. That's what's going on with her. And then she's finally sitting down and relaxing in this chair, and it's facing an open window. And I think that that's important, that it's facing an open window, because an open window means so much. All right, think about what an open window means. It could mean possibility. It could mean seeing things outside in the open. Better than a closed window. It could be like looking into yourself. So many different things. But we're going to keep reading, and we're going to find out. Line 25. She could see in an open square before her house the tops of trees that were all a-quiver with the new spring life. New spring life, okay? The delicious breath of rain was in the air. And we've talked about this. In line 27, it mentions rain. Remember, in literature, when you have rain, rain usually means like a new beginning, washing the old away and starting with the new. This is kind of a metaphor for what Miss Mallard is going through. She's washing the old away. Her husband is gone. Now she's starting anew. In the streets below, a peddler was crying his wares. That means like he's trying to sell his stuff. The notes of a distant song which someone was singing reached her faintly, and countless sparrows were twittering in the eaves. She's listening to everything. She's hearing everything. It's like being reborn and hearing everything for the first time. She'd been married to this guy for so long, and now he's gone. It's a new beginning. It's a new world. There were patches of blue sky showing here and there through the clouds that had met and piled in above the other in the west facing her window. We're now on line 34. She sat with her head thrown back upon the cushion of the chair, quite motionless, except when a sob came up into her throat and shook her, as a child who has cried itself to sleep continues to sob in its dreams. So it's like these residual cries, these residual whimpers. Like she's cried so much that she's just like exhausted and she's resting and she's waiting there. And then like this little last sad sob comes out. And I think this is important because this means that she's getting it out of her system. Like, have you ever seen like a kid when they're like, ooh, and they're crying and they're, ooh, right? They're crying and they're crying. And then you're like, you better be quiet. And then they stop and then they're like, right? They're getting those last few sobs out. And that's what she's doing. Line 38. She was young with fair, calm face, whose lines bespoke, sorry, you should be on second page, repression and even a certain strength. The most important thing I want you to know about that line is that she was young, okay? She's young, and now she has this new life. Think about that for a second, okay? And we're going to come back to it. But now there was a dull stare in her eyes, whose gaze was fixed away off yonder on one of those patches of blue sky. It was not a glance of reflection, but rather indicated a suspension of intelligent thought. I like this line because it says, but now there was a dull stare in her eyes. Here is a change. Something's happening. She's thinking something completely different. And she's not thinking about, oh, how much I miss my husband. Oh, the great memories. It said it indicated a suspension of intelligent thought. She's thinking about something. She's trying to figure something out. There was something coming to her, and she was waiting for it, fearfully. What was it? She did not know. It was too subtle and elusive to name, but she felt it, creeping out of the sky, reaching towards her through the sounds, the scents, the color that filled the air. Beautiful writing. This is personification. Something's coming for her. This thought, this idea. Like, you can see her. I get this mental, great imagery too. I see this woman sitting at a window and she's looking out into the sky as if she's looking for an answer or something's coming for her. And here it comes. It's coming slowly and her face is starting to change.